And we can, once we wrap it up, we can chat for a little bit more if you want. You hit streaming already? Oh, nice. Okay. Go ahead and hit record.
I did.
Okay. All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. My name is Brian Martinez, and I'm the director of MySec Lansing. Before we get started, I want to talk about our organization here. But first, I need to mention that if you're here and on the Zoom right now, you are being recorded. If you don't wish to be recorded, that's fine, but I politely ask you to drop off right now. Also, since we are in Zoom, whatever direct messages you have between each other ultimately can be seen at the completion of this call by me. Not that I'm looking for them, but just so you're aware, it's not completely private. All right. MySec is a no barrier to entry group whose primary purpose is to promote information security in Michigan. We do so by promoting other organizations and their respective meetups, such as ISACA, ISC Squared, ISSA, Cloud Security Alliance, and even the Automotive Security Research Group in Detroit, to name a good small handful of them. We also promote InfoSec in Michigan by providing support to one another, especially those entering or attempting to enter our industry, and by providing networking and educational opportunities such as this discussion that we're having tonight. We now have 6 chapters across the state: Ann Arbor, Detroit, Grand Rapids, Jackson, Lansing, and Southfield. All of our groups typically meet on the second weekday of a month. So Ann Arbor was this past Monday, where they discussed building malware labs using Vagrant. Jackson was last night, where we went over a number of forensic tools, what they do and how to use them. And of course, we're here in Lansing tonight. And I'll get to our speaker in a little bit here. Detroit also normally shares Wednesdays with us, but this month they're actually going to be meeting next week, and they'll be playing Whose Slide Is It Anyway? Grand Rapids and Southfield share second Thursdays, and this week they'll be sharing actually an OWASP quarterly meetup. When we meet in person, oftentimes we have a recruiter nearby to help make connections and work with you on questions that you might have about your resume or interview skills, those types of things. We also have social gatherings at our respective chapters the last week of every month. With the stay safe, stay at home order, most of us have been working from home, and so our socials have been a little inconsistent. For example, here in Lansing, oftentimes my kids are right there, loudly playing games, so I don't host a virtual happy hour like some of our other chapter directors. Almost all of our talks are live streamed and or recorded and can be found on our YouTube channel, which is MySec Group. We always welcome new speakers or suggestions for topics, so please reach out if you have any interest there. We also have a very active Slack community, over 750 members and around 150 active daily users. You'll always find a good conversation or a solid piece of advice there. You might even run into an argument or two, but we try to run a tight ship. If you aren't on our Slack, you can join up by finding a link on our website, which is mysec.us. You can even stay apprised of which chapters are holding remote socials and when. If you don't use Slack, look for us on Twitter under the name MySec. You can even use hashtag MySec to find some of the things we have going on. All right. All that said, I want to thank you all again for being here and watching our recording, or watching our recording if you're watching it later on YouTube. And I'd like to welcome Brian Donahue from Red Canary. Brian was out here in Lansing a couple of months ago, where he gave a great presentation on threat intelligence analysis. And Brian will be leading us off tonight on discussing the operational challenges of a distributed workforce. With that, go ahead, Brian.
Hello, everybody. So it's kind of timely because I think that the last, and I was talking about this earlier, so some of you already heard me say it, but I think that the last time I went out anywhere was to the MySec meeting in early March, and Brian Martinez's hand might be the last one I ever shake. So I thought it would be appropriate to sort of talk about the issues that people are facing as they've shifted very abruptly from a traditional work environment where everything is sort of centered around an office. And of course, you probably have remote employees, but most of your employees are working from home, to a very distributed, literally overnight. After that MySec meeting, we drove back to the Denver airport, or the Detroit airport rather. And we sat down at the bar, and we were watching a basketball game, and it was about to start. And then a doctor ran out in the middle of the court, canceled the game. they canceled the season, and like after that, like just basically like dominoes falling, states just started ordering stay-at-home orders, and now we're all sort of imprisoned in our own houses. So I'm hoping that this is going to be like a conversation, and I'm going to try and call on some of you and like sort of ask you sort of direct questions about how you're dealing with like this change, basically from an office-based traditional work environment to one where like all of the people and machines that you're tasked with protecting are like inside people's houses. And I'm equally interested in the IT challenges of this, which like my theory is that like it's probably kind of hard to be a security operations analyst, but it's probably worse to be working at a help desk right now. However, in case no one talks, I brought my colleague Shane with me. Shane, he's got his camera turned off right now because we learned he lives in the boonies and his internet connection is not great.
Hey, everybody.
Shane, what do you do at Red Canary? So we've got I should actually say that first. I work at Red Canary on the community team. Primarily, I like write about computer security. I help people produce research. I try to help produce like educational resources, whether it's videos or webinars. I come and have talks like this. And I also sort of help support some of our open source tools like Atomic Red Team. So Shane, what do you do?
Yep, I'm a detection engineer over here at Red Canary, which essentially just I'm doing a bunch of threat hunting, looking at a whole bunch of activity in lots of environments all at one time. Big data for security, if you will, just to kind of simplify it. And part of that also, our daily kind of workflow is doing a lot of threat research for new detector ideas and just figuring out how to effectively detect things more efficiently. So.
Sorry, I was muted there. I admittedly don't know if this is going to work, but I do want to try. There's only like 11 of us here, and I think one of us is MySec Lansing, which I don't believe is the real human. So I'd like to go around and like if everyone can introduce themselves, fine. If you really don't want to, find some way of signaling to me that you don't want to introduce yourself. But I'm going to start with Kyle because I think he's like pretty actively engaged with MySec Lansing.
Hi. Yeah, so I'm the director for MySec Jackson, and I also, since I live actually in Lansing or close to Lansing, I also usually attend the Lansing ones as well. I do kind of a lot of digital forensics, incident response, anything from detection engineering to threat hunting to HR, disaster, nightmare investigations, and beyond. Good times.
So I'm going in order of my screen. So next is someone who is operating under the handle of B Sailor. Can you talk? Can you tell us what you do?
Yes, sorry, transitioned to the Xbox headset today, so I'm just getting used to it. But yes, I'm actually a security recruiter in the Lansing and West Michigan area with tech systems. So I try to make MySec as often as possible and just educate myself with security and meet people along the way. So I will unmute myself or mute myself.
Great, sounds good. Justin, what do you do?
Hey guys, my name's Justin. I also work at Red Canary. Basically on the same team as Shane, except I've kind of transitioned to a separate team that handles mainly incident response from our incident response partners. So any given day, there could be, I don't know, anywhere 1 to 2 to 3 different incident response engagements that come online that we kind of help and manage with our partners and do some threat hunting, handle events, kind of get things under wraps for them. So pretty much whatever Shane said, I also do.
All right, Rich, you got to introduce yourself as well.
Yeah. Hey guys, I'm Rich. I've met Brian and Kyle. I work with Brian at Red Canary, Shannon and Justin as well. Essentially, I just create partnerships and kind of further the Red Canary brand in Michigan, Indiana, Illinois. So just kind of help also bridge the gap between community leaders such as Brian and Kyle and introduce them to Brian and see, how we can get Brian in front of people and embarrass him. It's kind of my favorite thing to do, actually.
All right, next on my screen, I'm assuming MySec Lansing is like just a blank screen, correct, Brian?
That's the PC I'm recording from.
All right, cool. So Mooney Thinker, I don't know what your real name is. You don't have to use it, but you got to tell me what you do.
Hey, my name is Nick. I work for the state of Michigan. I kind of bounce around in a lot of areas of IT for them. So I've done mostly my backgrounds in Linux and Unix system administration for most of that areas. And then now I'm actually over in servicing kind of IT business relations. So essentially, in a nutshell, my clients have a lot of fires and a lot of projects needing to be fixed, and I pretty much go in to resolve it and kind of negotiate on their behalf.
Cool. And then the last person here is Andrew. What do you do? And Andrew's staying on mute. All right. So I'm not going to call on you, Andrew, unless you come off mute and tell me to call on you. So like the most obvious thing, so like to be completely level with you guys, I have worked as a journalist covering InfoSec. I have worked as a threat intelligence analyst, like, doing thready stuff in InfoSec, but I've never really been like an in the trenches SOC analyst. So like this really, I have these assumptions that I've made that like some things are probably going to be problems for people when they go from, an office environment to a remote environment. And the first and most obvious thing to me is like, if anyone on this call, and Kyle, this probably isn't a great question for you, given all of the endpoint-based stuff we've been talking about up to this point. Like, if you are running a security program where most of your controls are network-based, like, what are you doing right now to ensure that the like employees and the workstations that you're supposed to protect are remaining protected? So, is there anyone here who like has found themselves in that situation? No.
I just hope for the best every day,
Yeah, so I was thinking so I'm going to put this to you, Shane, because you used to be a systems administrator. Like, is it a reasonable assumption to think that like most of your network-based security controls are kind of useless right now?
It is definitely frustrating, especially like with a lot of what you pay for. Like I know Cisco's, before I left being a system administrator, the place I was at before, we were talking about getting doing all of Cisco's network access control stuff. And that stuff was so expensive. I can't remember what they call it, but their whole platform. But like I would be so irritated if I spent that much money and just all of it was just gone to waste. But I know a lot of people are struggling now with being distributed, with, having enough backbone to support that many people, having to struggle to get licenses to make sure enough people are VPN in. And, it's almost like a whole nother ball game where you're, doing split DNS and all that fun stuff. So you're not overloading your firewall and stuff. And it's just, I'm glad I'm definitely not on that side of it anymore, because I know most companies weren't even prepared for this at all by being remote. So definitely like being on this side of it now.
And I also wonder like how many people, like if I'm, Joe Schmo in accounting and I work in the office 100% of the time, and like all of the stuff I'm able to access is accessible on like the local network. Like, so when I go out of the office, everyone's got to then get into a VPN and go like full tunnel mode to get into things at the office. Like, how is IT going to deal with that? Especially with people who like even like the best commercial, like company use VPNs are super confusing. So like, I wonder how much of a nightmare it's been for like help desk people trying to figure that out.
I can only imagine. I know I went over to my parents' house whenever this first started. My dad does sales. And, the thought of me explaining to him what a VPN is to begin with just terrified me. Like I'm driving over there and I just knew he was just going to be, so pissed off the entire time he's working from home, just because he's not going to understand any of it. But he kind of adapted really well. And I was kind of impressed with what he did. But I can only imagine just that level of, if somebody like, a lot of the IT teams that aren't patient with a lot of their people, and you really have to be if you're working with people on a regular basis on the help desk and system administrator side, that, I'm sure it's taxing because you're having to do the same thing over and over with each person. And it's almost kind of like explaining how to use a computer again.
Yeah. So Kyle, as I alluded to a minute ago, like we were talking before we started recording here and before people got on the phone. So I know that you're using a lot of like, you shifted on my screen. I thought you changed your name to Brian Martinez. Anyway, I know that you're using like a lot of endpoint-based EDR tooling. Like, have you found that your security team was like uniquely prepared for this shift?
So it really didn't affect us at all because we already had always on VPN for all our endpoints. So like no matter where people went, they already were basically coming back to our network. So all of our security tools for the most part were still working just fine.
Cool.
Had we not implemented that would have been a problem because you can imagine how many of those tools rely on being connected to your network. So yeah, we're lucky.
Yeah, that is incredibly lucky. I mean, I worked at a large and very sophisticated like enterprise, and everything was fine there. Like they would have had this all figured out unless you were using anything other than a Windows machine, in which case like you wanted to use a Mac in that environment and it blew up everything, like their whole gold load image that they used for everything. Like they couldn't figure out how to install it on a Mac. And that's had me wondering, like, who is this going to be more of a problem for, right? Like, is it a problem for small, agile companies that maybe don't have all the processes in place? Or is it a bigger problem for sort of giant enterprises that are like very set in their ways and can't adapt as quickly? And many of them, like, who don't have don't have work from home, like lenient work from home policies.
Yeah, if I may jump in there.
Yeah, go ahead, man.
So the only thing I've seen is like, so for example, I work for the state of Michigan and they had a lot of VPN. And so when everyone was working from home, so you got like 30,000 plus working from home now, or maybe less, like 25, because some are still on site. When you had that, the state of Michigan, for example, was able to transition pretty quickly. We had a little bit of bandwidth latency issues at the beginning, but it was only for about a week because essentially they saw it coming down the line and started preparing a week in advance and started moving, everything in that you needed and increasing throughput. The only thing I've seen based on reports that I've read from other organizations, like let's say JP Morgan Chase, is it's mostly based, it seems to be on the culture of the company. Like, how do they prefer to do business? And some companies, for example, JP Morgan has been transitioning employees in and out, even though they're in New York City. So it seems to be the ones that are struggling the most almost is based on the culture of the company. Because I also look at, like, for example, Apple today announced that they'll be going back on site starting, I believe, in June. Twitter, Jack Dorsey said that it'll be offsite in forever. And then Facebook and Google are talking about the rest of this year. So I think it's really just, it seems to be culture almost.
Yeah, I agree. And at some point in this conversation, I want to talk about like changes, basically, like how things have changed and how they're not going to unchange, but we'll get to that later. So like, I was going to follow up and ask how you guys feel about your visibility, but like, it sounds like you guys actually have your controls like completely locked down and you're doing well. So now I'm going to ask Brian a question because I think I saw on his LinkedIn that he does a lot of compliance stuff. So like, what are the ramifications for everyone leaving the office in terms of compliance? Like, how much of these regulatory measures assume the fact that there is an office and people are working in
it? There's some stuff I will not talk about, but it does certainly create challenges because there are, just because the way we work now is so different. And then there's, of course, some things we can't control for, given your home network versus our own network that we control, right? And so it definitely raises challenges. That's about as much as I'm willing to say. But it's something that we've been thinking about, and there are other areas where we've tried to actually make things maybe even a little more accommodating, so it's easier to get some things done. I won't go into anything too specific, but for example, in the medical space, we've kind of changed how telemedicine works a little bit versus how it was working, to make things a little bit easier, and also to try to ease up loads on specific systems. We've kind of changed the way, what do I want to say? Like the barrier to entry is in a different spot now. Let's say that.
So are you not just in charge of, are you not like, does your purview include, I don't even know if there's a hospital at Michigan State. I'm assuming because of what you just said that there is, and that that's under your umbrella. Is that correct?
So we don't have a hospital per se, not like University of Michigan, but we have a healthcare system that works with the local hospitals. Actually, one of them was in progress of being built, McLaren, just right close to campus. We also work with Sparrow Hospital in Lansing. So our area of purview as MSU Information Security, which is where I work, I didn't give that introduction to myself. So there's that piece. At Michigan State, MSU Information Security, our purview is all of campus. And we are basically our own small city. We've got a power plant, we've got a police department, fire department. We have a Center for Survivors. So we have to deal with VACA and VAWA, sexual assault related areas of compliance. We've got Graham Leach Bliley, all like everything that you can imagine in a city. We have to be concerned about. So yeah, HIPAA, PCI, NERC-CIP. We also have our own power plant. So I said that already, I think. But yeah,
I hadn't.
It's challenging for sure.
I hadn't considered that at all. I went to like a small liberal arts school with a few thousand people. So like the idea that you would have like a healthcare, I mean, there's probably 30,000 kids that go to, or people that go to MSU?
We have, I think, 60,000 total students, roughly. It might be like 58,000. But we're routinely between the 8th and 9th most populous university in the country. So
I'm assuming, I'm going to intersect here, Brian. I was just going to say, I'm assuming y'all have your domain segmented out, so you have separate domains for each one of those entities. Essentially, is that how y'all kind of approach it, like with your police department, your fire department, or are y'all pretty flat network, or?
So,
because that's always a struggle. Is why just being able to manage as an umbrella domain all of those in one.
Yeah.
It can definitely be frustrating.
Our network is a centralized network.
Gotcha.
But IT in general, up until recently, was highly decentralized. Every department, every college did their own thing. Largely, there were some people that were part of central IT, but it just became not cost effective to keep that up, right? And redundancies and resources and all that kind of stuff. So we centralized about 2 years ago now, I think. Maybe a little less. 2018, I think, is when they announced that we're centralizing pretty much all of IT. There are a couple of outliers, and there are research reasons why that is. I don't know that they'll ever come into the fold. They might not. That'll be dependent upon how future administrations want to take it. But yeah, like I said, we have a centralized network. We do allow. I might be misspeaking here. I think other than those outliers, I think some of the departments might have some level of control over what happens to that network in their department. But it's not like it was. So it's honestly not been too bad once we centralize things. There's a lot of politics behind it that I won't get into. Why it was bad or not. But yeah, from our standpoint, everything's kind of been okay.
I've previously worked at MSPs too, and I know there some of the clients. I've been in enough networks to know that most of them are just a cluster if they're anything older than 10 or 15 years, And it just that would be my biggest thing. Is I would just be so defeated knowing coming into this, just being able to deploy an effective from home approach for everybody in the in my organization if this was happening to me on that end. Luckily I don't have to be on it anymore, but
right.
I feel bad for all of y'all, but you're that's in that position.
so that's one of the things I was talking in kind of a webinar situation like this. I was talking to a guy from Global Payments, and it's you have to assume that whether or not you had a really robust BYOD policy before this, you have to assume now that your employees are using their personal devices to do a lot of stuff. Like I'm definitely because I'm running around the house, right? I'm definitely on my phone more, like checking Slack on my phone, calling people. And obviously I work in security. I'm always thinking about these things. I'm cognizant of whether or not people are overhearing me. I'm cognizant of what apps I install on my phone, but who knows how many people are just blindly installing their work stuff on their phone. Does IT or security have the ability to audit that or know that they're doing it or control identity from some sort of central location? And are these apps that they have on their phone just swallowing all of the data from these corporate communications, and what are the ramifications of that? So if anyone wants to speak to how they're feeling about their BYOD policies right now, I'll gladly indulge you. But if you don't want to, we could also move on to something else. Go ahead, Kyle.
I just want to say that we don't have a BYOB policy to bring your own device, or BYOD. Sorry, not B. That's different. And it's primarily because we take a pretty aggressive stance on making sure that we're able to control all the assets so that they're going to function the way that they should. And the hardest part that we saw before in the past is if people bring in their own devices, it's all those problems you're talking about. If you just allow someone to connect their normal home machine that they use offline, do whatever they want, and then they connect back to our actual network, you run into so many problems. Even before, when we didn't have always on VPN, Mondays were always magical because it was Virus Monday, because people would take their machines home, they would use them for personal use, and none of our controls were there. Proxy stuff wasn't there. So the sites they went to, even some simple news sites today, there's so much just terrible advertisement and adware and stuff that gets installed, and it's ugly. So Mondays were always a nightmare because it'd be all right, how many alerts we're going to get in today? Because they're always plugging in and coming back to the network, and we're finding out about all the bad things that happened. So I'm pretty against if you're in a large corporate environment, you want to maintain all of your assets in a reasonable fashion for a cost effective way, I should say. I would not use them.
Well, how much of that can be mitigated with strong identity-based controls?
I don't know. I don't think I've ever touched into that per se. So what do you mean by identity control, I guess? How'd you define that?
Yeah, so let's say you're to give a simple example, let's say your enterprise uses Google for email, right? So you can stick two-factor authentication in front of that Google account, and you can have the admin account that controls it. So if someone installs Google on their phone and you want to cut off that access, you have central access to cut it off if you choose to do that.
Yeah, and I mean, I think people take comfort in those type of controls that they know that they can cut it off or pull back data that's company data that's supposed to be in a a secure area on that machine. But the reality is, if you're an attacker and you spend enough time researching your target, if you take over their personal computer, which isn't going to have any of the protections that a normal enterprise asset would have, you can then control anything on the box. So I mean, it's just time at that point where they can either do a key logger on the machine or whatever. I don't know. It makes me feel really uncomfortable thinking that people are accessing sensitive company data on their personal device. I'll just leave it at that.
No, I feel the same way. So another thing that I'm interested in, and I'm definitely going to pick on you for this, Justin, because you made the mistake of admitting that you've been working in incident response. I feel there are a lot of things in incident response in particular that are traditionally done on site. Now, obviously, the way that Red Canary does incident response is a little bit different than that. So, it's going to be helpful to have had experience in a prior incident response role. But are there any things that IR teams generally do on site, system rebuilds, containment of machines, literally walking up to someone's machine who's become infected and taking it from them, that have become more complicated in this work from home world?
Yes, I mean, I don't typically see that side at Red Canary at the moment, but I mean, I can imagine pulling artifacts might be a little bit harder. I mean, if somebody's at home and their bandwidth is low and you're pulling an image from a machine, I mean, it's going to take forever, especially with the internet that you guys were talking about with the 5 megabits or whatever. So, I mean, that alone, just pulling the data might be a little quick, might be a little slower just because you're not in a corporate environment where you have decent bandwidth for the most part. But no, I mean, the way we do things is all remote. So, I mean, from our perspective, things flow correctly. But I mean, if your agent that's running on your machine can't communicate to your corporate network, like let's say Thorn Black or whatever EDR sensor you're using, if it can't phone home, I mean, that's also going to be a problem. I mean, if you're doing some janky stuff at home, like like a pie hole or whatever, you're monitoring your network and blocking suspicious stuff, and that could definitely be a problem. Because I mean, especially in incident response, like you really want all the data. I mean, you want as much data as you could possibly look at. So at the moment, I don't think we've run into any issues like that. Maybe one of our partners has, but I can't really speak to kind of the data collection side. I just kind of look at the data and do what I will with it.
Yeah, and then like on the other side of that, Shane, not really on the other side, but just you're talking about bandwidth restrictions, and it made me think of this. Like, how does taking everyone out of the office present problems for like patching or patch management?
It definitely can, and I hated doing patch management, WSUS. I mean, I don't think there's any good application. I think you're about to take me down a dark path right here, Brian. But managing WSUS is about the worst thing next to managing an on-prem Exchange server.
What does that stand for? Windows System Update Server?
Yeah, but like I will say, like before I left, they were getting better about it with what do they call it? OMS now in Office 365. It's their on-prem management server. I don't remember they change names every month on them, but it's pretty good. Like if you have that capability deployed, because it's essentially cloud-based, and you can manage as they do their check-ins. But like I said, unless you have access to that, I can only imagine the people and the policies, group policies that have been deployed previously, and how awful endpoints aren't getting updated. But at the same time, too, like, I've been in multiple networks that didn't update but once a year, and they ran fine. I really don't. I can speak on that side of it just because, I get the business side of running a network. Security people, I go back and forth with security people all the time. Like, as much as we believe everybody understands security as much as we do, like we're, on the back burner when it comes to being operating as a business. And it's definitely, I can definitely say it's a challenge probably for a lot of people going on right now. So I hope that answered your question, but I really didn't want to stay on that very long because I, as I said before, I'm not a system administrator before an on-prem Exchange and WSUS and backups. Backup exec in particular are the reason why I'm no longer a system administrator.
Well, I'm gonna keep dragging you into your life as a system administrator, and I want anyone who's worked in IT to think about and possibly try to answer this question for me. Is it possible that security teams and IT teams are going to have to configure firewalls and Soho routers in the houses of executives at their company, depending on how long this goes on for?
I don't think so. To a certain extent, I don't think so. Like, FortiGate does a really good job with, you're kind of talking about the BYOD, FortiGate's really probably the only one I can really speak on effectively, but they have what is it, like a HTTPS RDP session. So all of your remote desktop session is essentially done via a browser, if you will, instead of it being like a real RDP session. So it really does limit the amount of access you would from your home computer. They have a really good solution, but I don't think so, because I think most of people's internal networks are going to be, they're going to have full access outbound anyways. And me as a system administrator, if you asked me to do that, I'd be applying for other jobs the next day because I don't want to be going to people's houses and managing their networks. And maybe that was just my experience and personality of not wanting to deal with that kind of stuff. But it could definitely be overwhelming, especially if I'm having to do 10 things. Because here's the other thing is like the more ISPs you start adding, depending on what city you have, you may have 5-10 different firewalls and stuff, and people may have custom firewalls, and you don't want any of that liability on breaking stuff at home for them and all that other stuff. So I would just either quit or buy a firewall or something. Propose that solution to a better solution than ever touching anybody's home network, for sure.
No, I mean, that makes sense. I was leading the witness, you especially wouldn't want to be like going to someone's house in the time of, a highly infectious disease that has us all required to stay at home. So I had another thought here that is escaping me. So what I was wondering is like, how much like of IP-based sort of whitelisting stuff becomes problematic when everyone's like not working from the same network, or is it not really relevant? I'm calling on you, Shane.
Oh, I was going to see if anybody else would answer. Application whitelisting in general, and this is me again from being a system administrator, is a huge pain. It takes months, if not years, to get it down effectively, especially, and I can only imagine speaking from like an organization like, correct me if I'm wrong, Brian, or Brian M., but the Lansing, with all the different, you got the fire department and all their different kind of applications each one of them needs, it's almost impossible, I would imagine, to effectively deploy application whitelisting. And so it's the idea of application whitelisting is good. Effectively putting it into a business, like, to be honest with you, it always cracks me up whenever I hear all these application whitelisting bypass techniques being used, and it's like, who even uses application whitelisting to begin with? To be honest with you, and like it just takes so long to implement effectively, and it's very rare that you run across organizations. I think, like, if I had to just put a number on it, I'd definitely say there's probably less than 10% organizations have application whitelisting, and that's probably being generous too. That's probably giving a lot more credit than. But do y'all kind of share that same sentiment? Do any of y'all have application whitelisting effectively deployed?
So since you kind of called me out there, I'll respond. No, I mean it's fine. It's fine. So we're not doing any sort of that. There might be some departments on campus that are doing that. But yeah, from a centrally supported standpoint, that's not something that's presently happening. Now, given what you said, because we have so many different groups doing different things, it would certainly create a very large challenge to do so. But it would be doable, I think, if we get there. There'd be a good handful of applications that would have to be whitelisted on all of the laptops or desktops that we hand out, and then we would have to make those exceptions for the edge cases. Like, this department uses this very specific piece of software, so we need to make sure that they can run that. But I don't see going that way anytime soon. Like, that would be years down the road. Especially given everything that's going on right now, especially at universities where they're talking about belt tightening and things like that. Like, it would require a larger workforce to manage that kind of.
100% agree.
Load.
Yeah. And honestly, I don't see any organization that isn't within the past 5 years. If I was starting a new network and a new company, I definitely, I could definitely see it being doable, but coming in retroactively in an environment like that would be, it's a nightmare just trying to imagine, because most of the time, you have everybody, local administrators just deployed throughout the entire enterprise. And, each organization has their different applications they use that IT doesn't know about for the most part. And so you start taking that away, everybody starts complaining, and it's real fun. It's real fun being on the IT side, system administration side. I don't sound sour at all. I have never posted in. I've never posted in upset sysadmins or whatever that Reddit is called.
It's like pretty clear that the regular sysadmin Reddit is full of disappointed people as well. So like to move back to sort of the security side, and this is like kind of hot takey, I will admit, but one of the things I've been wondering is like, is there going to be any change on the adversary side of this? Like, I think the most likely thing that you would see changes on, or maybe like an adaptation to the realization that like most people are working from home. And I don't know how that would sort of materialize. Actually, that's not true. The most likely change is COVID-related phishing schemes, but I have no interest in talking about that. But I wonder, like, everybody's working from home. Like, have you guys, like, so I'm getting to a point here, so I'm going to ask this question first, though. Like, has anyone here, like, taken advantage of any of this, like, free training that's going on, like, in their free time or just, like, while working to try and, like, get better at things during this time?
Totally. My work offers Pluralsight right now. And then plus, before they offered Pluralsight, there was a total sale at Udemy, which is completely random. They never have sales. And so like I just binged, I bought a bunch of them. So while I'm usually like, if it's like a lull moment in work and I've gotten everything else caught up and my kid's kind of just playing on the tablet, I've been studying, and then all night I study. And that's pretty much what I'm consistently doing while home. I've been able to actually study a lot more than regular.
So what I'm wondering is, like, doesn't it, sorry, go ahead, Kyle.
I was just going to add on, it's kind of interesting. One thing that working from home has changed is, since you don't have to like drive to and from work sometimes, that time that you would have spent doing that, sometimes you find yourself working more hours than you normally would have. And so I think I find more time that I could potentially look into more things, whether it be training or other articles to read up on and get familiar with, that I may not have done before, just because the extra time that I knew I had to leave at this time to get home and do that and yada yada.
I mean, even as a person who has been remote, like, I still have found myself, I think, working more than I worked before all of this started. And the point I'm getting at, like, I promised there would be a hot take coming, and here it comes. Like, what I'm wondering is the same thing true on the adversary side? Like, these people are in the same situation as us. They're, they just have more free time now. They're going out less. So I'm wondering if, like, we're going to see a payoff and sort of new and interesting, like, variations on attack techniques in the coming months as, like, these sort of additional training benefits start to set in. And then, like, the other thing is, like, and this is, I'm going to go into another hot take here, like, criminals, like, people other than, like, state sponsored, like, intel agencies, like, a lot of the people who are writing this tooling for, like, crypto miners or, like, commodity malware, like, they all already work from home. There was no shift for them, right? Like, they kind of had to jump on, like, nothing changed except they have more free time. So I'm sort of interested to see if that, like, if anything changes. My guess is no. Like, things that work, like, 2 months ago probably still work and will work next year. But the lack of a commute thing you brought up is interesting and a good segue into, like, the last sort of broad thing I wanted to talk about, which is, like, I think that there's going to be, like, a lot of people are like, don't call it the new normal. It's not the new normal. It's temporary. Like, that's not true. It's not. Like, a lot of these things aren't temporary. Some things aren't. Like, that job they told you couldn't be done remote, turns out it can be done remote. Like, as you said, Twitter just announced, like, anybody who wants to work from home forever, they can work from home if they want. So, like, I'm wondering, like, what are going to be some, like, the bad permanent outcomes? I think we actually just talked about a bunch of those. So let's go on to the positive outcomes. So, like, what are positive outcomes of this? Like, you brought up no commute. That's probably the best one, right? Like you don't have to sit in your car. And I live in the DC metropolitan area, so like not commuting is like a huge benefit because we probably have the worst traffic anywhere in the country, other than maybe Los Angeles. So like, has anyone else noticed any other positive outcomes of this? Like not, obviously like cost savings from not having to pay for office stuff, but you guys seem to be more on the practitioner level and probably less concerned about that. Any positive outcomes that you guys are foreseeing?
If I may jump in, unless anyone else wants to go first. For me, I didn't like. It sounds like a really weird one, but I never even really noticed like how much, kind of like the small talk social anxiety was actually driving me nuts. And then because I don't actually have to incorporate that in my day anymore, or feel like someone's like, because the way the state of Michigan's got their cube set up is your back's always to the door. So, and everyone's walking through, it's a highway in all different ways. And it's extremely distracting. It's extremely thought breakup. And then the small talk where you're just like, no one's in the break room, run there now, and then run back. And it's like, it's just, it's so much more relaxing. Like, it's just, I don't know, in total. Yeah. And I guess, yeah, the driving, the commute, like I'm in Lansing area. So like the traffic here, I love it when people complain and it's like takes us 5 minutes to get anywhere. It's like, but you don't have that anymore. And it's like, this is really able to concentrate and relax.
Yeah, I agree. As a person who suffers from some light attention deficit disorder, working in an office can be problematic for me. And then the other thing that like, does anyone feel like they're doing like a live drill of their disaster recovery / like business continuity plan right now? And like, have you found that like I guess the better question to ask is, had anybody planned for a scenario like this?
Well, go ahead, Brian.
I just was going to say, I think no one has really planned for a scenario like this. Maybe a much lighter version than this, right? Where like, oh yeah, there's a little outbreak and it'll be done with in a couple of weeks or a month or whatever. To say, what are we, like 2 months, 3 months into this? 3 months, March, April, May, roughly 3 months into this, that we're still here and in some cases, in some situations, right, talking about, not going back at all. I don't think anyone could have ever predicted that this would happen.
I'll kind of chime in here too. So I used to work for, like I was saying, I live in the same city that I used to work for, but I worked for the city of Weatherford, Texas. It's just right outside of DFW Metroplex. Weirdly, whenever Hurricane Harvey came and hit, and this is just kind of funny, but like Hurricane Harvey came through and hit, the whole state of Texas was like getting ready to shut down because we thought we were going to run out. Called the Great Gasoline Shortage of this, like 2017, and so we had kind of put in plans to have the entire organization shift to a remote thing in anticipation of it, and like, even though it's nowhere near the same thing when it comes to, some of that, but like it really is. I mean, the grand scheme of things. So I think, I don't work there anymore, but I think they were probably, I imagine that kind of helped. But like, I don't think anybody by any means like looked at planning. I mean, I'm sure there's some oddball companies out there that did, but I don't think that was kind of at all being enforced, everybody being remote at one time. I don't know if that was ever something that most companies planned for.
Yeah, I wonder if like certain organizations had thought about it, right? Like you would hope that like the Centers for Disease Control had this in their, in their disaster recovery plan or their business continuity plan, but like, I guess you never really know. And I think we missed an opportunity actually when we were talking about threat changes, because I think the biggest and the most obvious and like pressing change to the threat landscape is going to come from like, unfortunately, layoffs, right? Like I talked to a security team, won't say, well, actually I didn't talk to them, but I was on the debrief after they talked to them, and basically high level management at the company was like, you got to cut 70% of your budget. Don't care how you do it. Like tools, humans, whatever. So like that's going to be happening, like especially if this drags on through the summer, like there's going to be layoffs. And I got to think that that's going to lead to like, potential increases in insider threat activity. Are any of you sort of concerned about that, or like have you thought about it at all?
I think the one piece on that is if the economy, I don't think a lot of people took into effect like, hey, our data center like got taken out, and where's our backup? How do we pull from backups? But I don't think anyone ever thought of like the economic downturn, like you were just describing, like where so many people get laid off. Okay, our business doesn't have money to actually function and keep these data centers up and running and things like that. Or we can't send people in there because they're not letting people in without certain type of PPE. I don't think anyone really prepared for that scenario.
Yeah, we had like tornadoes hitting the building and stuff. Like,
yeah,
that's what most of them I think are.
That's such a Texas answer. Mooney Thinker, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I was going to say like I'm an avid consumer of a lot of financial news, especially like Bloomberg news. I listen to the radio and TV a lot, so I'm actually constantly going over financial news, and it's kind of funny too because as I'm watching it, I remember writing to my family today. I was like, "Oh, projections are really bad. Emphasis on really," and like my family's like, "Can you dumb it down?" And I was like, "Data looks crap." So long term, it's like if you really look at it, the financial data just across the board, doesn't matter which region you're in, even if it's like if you consider countries, world globally, it's gonna be like trying to restart a diesel truck that's been turned off for a while.
Yeah, I refuse to look at any of my 401k accounts at this point.
Yeah, stay away from that. We're young enough to. We're young enough to where it's going to be bouncing back. But yeah, just all the data. We haven't even gotten really the Q2 results yet until like June. When that hits, I'm pretty sure everyone should just turn the TV off for a while, maybe 2 weeks. You'll still survive, but it's going to suck.
Yeah, I think, who am I to make predictions about such complicated and like opaque things as the economy? But I think Q2 is probably the one that is going to be most problematic. So like the one other thing that I have been thinking about is like, to what extent, so like obviously at some point, most companies are going to return to the office, like maybe in staggered fashion. But like in the same way that being somewhat prepared to make your whole workforce go work from home, like the companies that were most prepared to do that probably have had the easiest time. And like, honestly, you guys all seem pretty well prepared for it with like your full-time tunnels and your nice endpoint controls. But like, to what extent is it going to be like maybe not as challenging, but somewhat challenging to now transition back to the workplace? Like, are you guys planning for that? Have you thought about it at all? Go ahead, Kyle.
No. It's actually, it's kind of funny because our entire team, just before a lot of the COVID news and a lot of the changes in policy and social distancing happened, my entire security team was actually out of the office and working from home. And we were doing that because we were changing up our workspace so that it could be a little bit more efficient for what we're doing. We're doing kind of like a joint fusion center. And so we now have like this entire area built out for us to all be there in person to work with each other and synergize with physical and cyber. But now we're all working from home. So it's like, gosh dang it. So like we're all really excited to get back and like to utilize that to its max extent. But until like we really find solutions to this current pandemic, like we can't. So it's a weird spot to be in, I think.
From what I understand, because I work in the technology part for my organization. So from what I understand from my management's team that was explaining it to us earlier today, was the entire organization's perspective is that the state of Michigan's return to work is effective May 28th. If it gets extended or not, they're just going to kind of watch based on legislative and executive determinations. And then after that, how they're going to do it is they're going to look at it based on public facing, how directly public facing you are. And then from there, they're still currently working out the details of how do we change the cubes? Because a lot of cubes are going to be four-cornered. So they're going to be like people are next to each other. So how do you reverse sections? So another idea that came up in the management meetings that I did hear was they're talking about doing one-ways. Like, so instead of like everybody comes in one direction, and both ways and two-way streets are going to be doing one-ways down cubes, and there'll be little arrows to kind of remind you. The challenge that they've come up with that they're having a really hard time is, and it seems kind of weird, but it is quite an obvious area. It's just one that's not really usually discussed. Is like going to be common areas like the break rooms and bathrooms. Like, how do you time how long a person's in the bathroom, and do you clean it afterwards, and things like that.
Yeah, and just physically, like bathrooms are like there's like a bottleneck by the door and the sink, and there's like no way to stay 6 feet away from each other at any time in there. So yeah, I mean, I'm interested to see how this all goes down. Like, my sense is that like reestablishing the status quo is going to be probably almost as much of a challenge as it's been sort of like breaking the status quo. But like, I guess time will tell. Hopefully, like the situation gets better than it's been. But I guess we'll just have to wait and see. There's only like 5 minutes left. I don't really have anything else to ask you guys. I do hope that I haven't like completely wasted your time tonight. I've enjoyed talking to you guys. I've learned some stuff. Does anybody else like have anything they want to say up to and including Brian Martinez?
I'll just wait for anyone else that wants to chime in, and then we'll wrap it up. Oh, looks like Kyle's raising his hand. Go ahead, Kyle.
The only thing I want to mention, going back to bring your own devices, the other fun challenge to get around is, so normally in enterprise, you're used to being able to pull all those that forensic evidence. You never really think about privacy and some of the other information that gets caught up in that. And what, Rem, if you have people bringing their own devices or working from home in that fashion, and you don't have like a legal policy stating that, if you use this asset for work or how that may work, how you protect yourself from trying to do your job of protecting your business's information on that asset. That's going to get really challenging for anybody that's doing that strategy.
Yeah, I was going to say too, in the bring your own device topic, for where I work at the state of Michigan, for example, they scan and they know every single physical object that's actually been connected to the network. It's every single one of them. So for example, this week they came out with a policy explaining that for anyone that's been using a personal like TV monitor or a printer, those will be non-compliant, and not just, hey, we're just telling you to monitor yourself. That literally will not be connected to the network. It actually will be shut off at the point, is what cybersecurity just explained. I'm not one that's been using a personal one, but there are exceptions in place. But for what I understand, the exception in place, for example, a printer is pretty extensive if you really need it, kind of thing. And beyond that, the only other thing I'd actually say is that if we could have Jack Dorsey's idea just kind of applied across all organizations, I'd be completely fine with working from home for the rest of my life.
Yeah, I will say this. I've done it for a long time, and there are things that, like, after doing it like for longer than periods of months, you will miss about going into an office. But honestly, like the benefits of like not getting on a car and driving on dangerous highways and like fewer workplace incidents, like it just seems like so obvious that work from home should be allowed almost in any scenario. But who am I to say? Anyway, thanks for coming here and talking with me and letting me interrogate you guys about things. Back to you, Brian.
Thank you, Brian. I really appreciate you coming out. Coming out virtually to be with us. You definitely got me thinking about a couple of things that I'm going to talk to my team about when I get back to work tomorrow. Other than that, I'm still looking for a speaker for next month. If anyone is interested, or if you've got a topic that you want to hear some more about, I'd be happy to investigate that. If people want to kind of hang around for a little bit, I'm fine with that. I'm going to stop the stream in a moment, though. And other than that, I'll just say thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, Brian.
Thanks, everyone.